Muffins, if you were here last year. Yeah, we ripped that title off of someone a couple of years ago. We had a similar event, an alumni event. So tonight's focus is global solidarity, and we are very pleased to welcome Rhonda Miska. Yeah, and Rhonda works at Villa Maria, so if you're familiar with the Humility of Mary Sister, she works with the sisters there. She's a teaching associate. She brings a lot of personal experience with issues related to immigration and migration, and so we're very excited to have her talk tonight. Because as you know, comprehensive immigration reform is something that the church is really pushing for, and it's just good to learn a little bit more and to form our consciences. And also, since our parish has a relationship with El Salvador, it's good for us to understand some of the root causes of poverty and things that are going on down there. So, if you wouldn't mind, just a little note of housekeeping. You could just sign in. You don't have to put your email address if you don't want to. Somewhere there's a pen here. It's behind the metal on the. Oh, it's behind the. Yeah. Okay. Someone's smart. Yeah, and then afterwards, Rhonda would like to take a picture with our group. And she'll explain a little bit more about that. So the first part will be a presentation, and then there'll be some time for questions and hopefully some good discussion about this issue. So I'm going to let Rhonda introduce herself. She has a very impressive set of credentials. So everyone, please join me in welcoming Rhonda Miska.
Thank you, Mary Lynn, and thank you. And this is being filmed amazingly with technology. So if you know of folks who can't be here tonight but who are interested in the topic, that will be available. So as Mary Lynn said, my name is Rhonda Miska. I'm actually a partner in mission with the Humility of Mary Sisters. Like people are always confused. Are you non? Are you associate? So I brought lots and lots of reading material, as you can see on the table. Some from the Villa Maria Education and Spirituality Center, some about the HMs, some from Americans for Justice, which is the organization that I serve. So feel free to take information if you'd like there. Just to say a little bit more about my background, I'm originally from Wisconsin. I served as a Jesuit volunteer in Nicaragua from 2002 to 2004. And after that, I worked in parish ministry for 4 years in the Diocese of Richmond, Virginia, in Hispanic ministry. So working with immigrants primarily from Mexico and Central America. I have a master's degree from Boston College of Hispanic Ministry. And I'm concerning religious life, so I've been living at the Mother House of the Sisters since June. And I imagine you've heard something in the news about the migrant children coming. And so there is a real concern among the sisters. One of the sisters, Catherine Cassidy, founded Americans for Justice. She came to the community in August asking for support, talking about the number of children that had crossed the border. And so the sisters settled down for a month to work directly with the migrant children there. So that's mostly what I'm going to be speaking about tonight is my experience with the migrant children. But, feel free to ask me other questions if you're interested in hearing more about parish ministry with Hispanic immigrants or my work in Nicaragua as a Jesuit volunteer or anything like that, or global solidarity in general. Just look forward to our conversation. So tonight is, one other note of housekeeping. I have 3 brief videos that I'm going to show. So if at any point you need volume up, let me know, or if it's, you want the lights down to see better, just raise your hand and let us know. So I mentioned I served with Americans for Justice, founded by Sister Catherine Cassidy. Their mission is to promote, protect the basic human rights of immigrants through free direct services, impact litigation, policy reform, and public education at local, state, and national levels. So they used to be known as the Florida Immigrant Advocacy Center. They have an office in D.C. and then their main office is in downtown Miami, which is where I was serving. And the theme of tonight is global solidarity. So I just wanted to hear from you, what do you know about solidarity? Where have you heard the word? What does the word mean to you? Or have you never heard it before? Yes. And then with migrant workers?
because it's going to be, Chavez.
Cecilia Chavez.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so those, some of those.
It's a pride to put together and speak up. It's a tradition.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else want to add on? Yeah.
Yesterday we kind of talked about it and see if we would learn kind of what I kind of like that these people we should look at them as like those other people, like we should look at them like they're like the same as us, but maybe sometimes they have like a lot of ways to see them but we should like keep that and interactive.
Thank you. Yeah, the idea that it's not those people over there, but that, this us is inclusive of all of us. It's not just us versus them, but that we are one human family. Yes, you want to answer?
And who's beyond
Yeah, that's beautiful. John Paul II says something really similar. This is from one of his encyclicals. He says, solidarity is not a feeling of vague compassion or shallow distress at the misfortunes of so many people, both near and far. On the contrary, it is a firm and persevering determination to commit oneself to the common good, that is to say, to the good of all and each individual, because we are all really responsible for all. So this idea of moving on beyond pity to real to action in the sense of belonging to each other. This is articulated in the preferential option for the poor, which came out of the Latin American bishops in the last century. And it's deeply rooted in scripture, the idea in the Hebrew scriptures and the widows, the orphans, and strangers, which over and over again we hear this call of concern for them. And then very strongly, of course, in the New Testament, Jesus speaks over and over about concern for the poor and the vulnerable, most powerfully in Matthew 25. Whenever we feed the hungry or visit the imprisoned or clothe the naked or care for those who are in distress, that we are in fact doing that for God's self. So as I continue to talk tonight, I invite you to kind of keep this lens of solidarity in mind as we're kind of looking at things through that framework. So this is a group of the legal staff down there, the Americans for Murder Justice, so made up of lawyers and paralegals, and it's a really, really wonderful, hardworking team of people. Very dedicated. These are all people who've gone to law school and paid way too much money in most cases for their law degrees, and are choosing to, instead of going into for-profit work, are using their skills to serve immigrants who otherwise wouldn't have legal support. So really, really tremendous group of people. It was a real blessing to work with them. I served as part of the children's legal team, which provides representation for minors who are in legal proceedings. There's also a division called Lucha, which works with survivors of domestic violence. So they go into detention facilities, they go into the courts. They also, as I said, have an office in DC, so they do lobbying. Because all of these issues, you do charity and justice, so you try to meet the immediate need before you, and at the same time say, let's try to get at the structural roots of these problems. And in many cases, what's needed is legislative change, which happens on the level of our Congress. So I'm going to move into talking about the migrant children that have been coming to the U.S. border, fleeing the violence in Central America. But first, I want to do a little test and see if we can come up with the countries of Central America. Starting at Mexico and working our way down.
Oh.
We've already named El Salvador. So we've got one. El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Belize,
Honduras.
Panama. Excellent. Don't tell, but you guys are way better than the kids at Canton. Yes, so here's a map. Here's the countries we named: Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. So when we're talking about these unaccompanied migrant children, you can see the statistics up there. The vast majority are coming from a region that's known as the Northern Triangle, which is Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. There's a few coming from other places, but that's, the vast majority, over 90% are coming from those countries. And now you might wonder, well, aren't they coming from Mexico? We hear so much about immigration from Mexico. Well, because of just procedurally the way legislation works, anyone coming from Mexico, anyone coming from a country that's contiguous to the United States can automatically be returned. If you're coming from another country, because of what's the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act, which is known as TVPRA. It's a piece of legislation passed in 2008 by Bush. People coming from places besides Mexico and Canada actually have the right to ask for a hearing before a judge. So the children coming from the Northern Triangle, as soon as they cross the border and are designated unaccompanied children, they have the right to a hearing before a judge. Now, of course, every child's story is unique, but I'm going to show you the story of Oscar. Oscar is a client of Americans for Justice. So this video is several years old, but it's quite relevant. And at the time this video was made, Oscar was 18 years old, but at the time that he left Honduras and came to the United States, he was 14 or 15. And then he crossed and applied for asylum. So I'm going to bring up the story. It's in Spanish with English subtitles, so the
Yo vengo viendo a mi país porque mataron a mi papá, a mi hermano, me querían matar a mí. Entonces mi mamá decidió que yo tenía que dejar el país. Entonces opté por venirme para aquí. Mi papá se dio cuenta que a mí me apasionaba jugar en la computadora y pues él decidió abrir un negocio así de internet y ponerlo en mis manos, porque él me dijo que si a mí me gustaba tenía que salir adelante con él. Aquí está mi papá, mi hermano y nosotros, la familia completa. Yo, mi hermano, mi mamá. Cuando veo estas fotos me traen recuerdos bonitos. Bueno, los recuerdos cuando estábamos todos juntos, empezaron los problemas en la ciudad. Empezaron a meterse los pandilleros de la MS3. Empezaron ellos a mandarnos cartas, a decirnos que teníamos que pagarle renta. Ellos empezaron pidiendo 100 empiras, pero después, al ver que nosotros miraban que no les dábamos, que ellos pensaban que nosotros no estábamos gozando, que nos fueron pidiendo 200 y así sucesivamente, hasta que nosotros pagamos y fue que ellos se costaron la familia. Fue algo horrible para que todavía eso lo tengo fresquecito en mi memoria, no se va a borrar. No sé cómo, pero en un tiempo que estuvimos bien, empezaron a llamar a mi mamá, empezaron a llamar a mí, amenazándome. Yo que mismo, yo sabía que ahí estaba corriendo peligro, y ahí corro peligro yo, y ese es un miedo grande que están tratando. Mi viaje completo, desde que salí de Honduras hasta que entré a Estados Unidos, me duró 1 mes y medio. Bueno, ese viaje fue difícil, porque entrando en México tuve que pasarlo en tren. El tren, la bestia, son trenes de carga, pero nosotros que venimos como inmigrantes, nosotros lo ganamos con un transporte es peligroso y a la vez arriesgado. Pues cuando entré a los centros de detención, ahí sí me di cuenta que no era el único que venía huyendo de mi país. Y fue como estar en los mismos, estar en la misma situación. tengo una mini baleada. Lo que menos quiero pensar es que me digan que me van a despertar para una bendición de estar la gente que me ayuda en realidad. Y pues no quiero pensar que me van a ayudar. Bueno, mis planes aquí son estudiar. Yo quiero terminar mi estudio, graduarme, siendo técnico, ingeniero de educación, ayudar a rehacerle una nueva vida a mi mamá, ayudarle económicamente, porque eso es lo que con esa mentalidad no se viene para este país. Yo quiero mi baleada.
So that is Oscar's story. And as you can see, it has a happy ending. Yeah, I'm happy to report that he has asylum, he's working his way towards citizenship, he's in school, he's with his family. But that gives you a sense of the context from which these children are coming. Tremendous gang violence. I did intakes with the children, so my work there was to interview the kids and hear their stories and figure out what forms of relief they might be eligible for, and also to go to court and accompany them in court. And he talks about the gangs, the Central American gangs. So the two primary gangs down there are known as the Marasa Maputo Tese, the NS-13, and Calle 18, the 18th Street gang. And these are not gangs like, the Jets and the Sharks from the West Side Story. These are really powerful transnational organizations. They really have their roots here in the U.S. These both were founded in Los Angeles. In fact, their name, 13th Street and 18th Street are named for streets in Los Angeles. So when people were fleeing the violence in the 1980s with the war in El Salvador, came to the U.S., a small element got criminalized and formed gangs. They were deported back to Salvador, and that's the root of these gangs. So it's really not fair to call them Central American gangs. They really are born and bred here in the United States. But of course, with the history of violence in Central America, there wasn't really full disarmament after the armed struggles of the 70s and 80s. So you have that context. So we've got these very powerful gangs that are trafficking drugs or trafficking humans. They're very, very well armed. Honduras has the highest murder rate of any country in the world. You're actually more likely to be killed by a firearm in Honduras than you are in places where there's actually a declared war. Hello, welcome. Over here. They recruit kids as young as kindergarten. So there's a lot of kids like the Oscar situation who the gangs want them to run drugs, or oftentimes girls, gang members will want a girl to be his girlfriend by force. And so the kids will either drop out of school, maybe they move to another town in the country in order to get away. So in most cases, these kids have already taken measures to try to get away from the violence. And some are also dealing with situations of family violence. In many cases, one or both of the child's parents are here in the U.S., so immigrated to come work. And maybe the parent is somewhere in the States working, and they left the child in care of an aunt or uncle or a grandparent. Maybe that aunt or uncle or grandparent is killed. There's a really close story about the kidnapping of his brother, who visited a ranch where he was ready to ransom to the gangs. And so then the parents who are here in the U.S. will send for their children to home. So those are some of the big picture framework for why these children are coming. And I really want to stress that these children should not be understood as economic migrants. I think historically a lot of migration, not just from Latin America but all around the world, is really fueled by economic factors. People come because they can get a better job, there's an opportunity for a higher income, a better state of life. I mean, certainly poverty is a reality in most countries, but these children really they're fleeing violence, and the motivation for leaving their home countries is primarily violence and not economic reasons. And I want to say something about the term alien. So these children are known as UACs, unaccompanied alien children. Now, of course, the term alien usually conjures the image of what you see here on my right, as opposed to a small human being. And I use the term UAC because it's the official government designation, so just for the sake of consistency. But I also think it's complex Christians, the term alien is very powerful because over and over again in the Hebrew scriptures, as I said, about this message of do not oppress the alien, do not molest the alien, for you are all strangers in the land. So this idea of, sometimes the Hebrew word is translated alien, a foreigner, a stranger, but this idea of God reminded God's people over and over again to hospitality and to welcome, remember the Holy Spirit happens within the outsider. So it's a complicated term. So, definition of who UACs are, this is a designation that was created by the Homeland Security Act in 2002. So, obviously, they're under 18 years old, they're minors, and if they enter the U.S. Without the physical custody of their parents or guardian to care for them, and they don't have immigration status, so they're not coming with a visa, they're not coming with permission, then they're given the designation UAC when they cross the border to the United States. And what this means, once a child is designated to UAC, the Obama administration made a decision last July that people with this designation, UAC, are placed on what's known as the Walker Project. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. Just want to take a little pause before I dive into the story of the journey from the children's home countries to the U.S. through the immigration process to our office. And maybe some of you are already thinking, as I've heard these presentations that I've given before, oh my gosh, wasn't that so depressing? How do you go do this? And we were working with these kids and hearing these tragic stories. And I mean, if you don't hear anything else from me tonight, I hope that you hear that these kids, they're really good kids. I mean, I found their resilience to be very inspiring. They're kids like any other kids who want to be with their families, they want to go to school. And I had some very positive experiences in the course of interviewing a 14-year-old from Guatemala. And I asked him, why did you get, and I'm following this official format I have to fill out. Why did you leave Guatemala? He said, porque yo quiero vivir alemán, because I have human. And I just thought, yeah, no, I mean, yes, you do. And he said that, this desire to live in peace, this desire to not be a part of gangs, to not be a part of violence. And there's sometimes you'll hear voices, more strident voices on the other side of the debate saying, oh, we can't give these legal amnesty because they're going to bring gangs in here. These kids want to be in gangs. They stay in their home countries. They're giving up everything. They're risking their lives to not be involved in gangs, to not join gangs. And so it's very compelling to listen to their stories. One other story, another boy, I think he was 15 years old. And so I go through this whole intake process with him in my office. It's like in his home country, journey to the U.S., and explaining, what it's going to be like when he goes to court and what his options are, and, asking about the conditions of the shelter that he's staying. And I asked him at the end, do you have any questions for me, so you can be prepared when you go to court? Because many of you can imagine going to court as a child in a foreign country where you don't speak the language and the judge is up there in the box. And I asked this child, is there any question I can answer for you so I can prepare? And I think he's going to ask me some question about what he should wear or what paperwork he should bring. And he says, I just want to know if when I go to court, if Jesus will be with me. And I was totally thinking about sí, claro que sí, yes. So just a few stories to show you the strength and the faith and the resilience of these kids. So they might be demonized in the media or portrayed, caricatured in a very negative way, but kids like any other kids who have lived through things that you or I hopefully can even begin to imagine. So now I want to talk a little bit about the experience of, a little bit about just the numbers as well, and I think this is really important. 66,142 entered the U.S. as of August 31st, that's the most recent stat I could find. And last year, or in 2013, 73% are male, 27% are female, 24%, so almost a full quarter, are under the age of 14. So these are not, again, sometimes we hear voices in the media that say, oh, they're all like 17 and 3/4, and they're, these are really adults. No, 24% are under the age of 14. The smallest child I had in my office was 2 months old. The smallest child I had who made the journey unaccompanied was 6 years old.
So these very much are children. And I want to, looking at particularly the state of Ohio, how many children have been reunited here in the U.S. with families or sponsors. So last, you can see the dates there. In the state of Ohio is 24, and then over a longer span of time, 635. And if you're interested in keeping up with this, this is from the Open Human Services website, and they're always updating this for various states and for the whole country. And I think it's important to know these numbers because, again, you hear people say that this is kind of portrayed as like this is this overwhelming horde of children that's coming into our country, and oh my gosh, our schools and our hospitals can't handle it. Well, 635 children in the entire state of Ohio. I mean, that's not an overwhelming number that's going to bring any healthcare system. And we have a strong history in the country of welcoming immigrants and refugees, and certainly, the state of Ohio can handle 635 by the way. So moving along to look at the journey north. So as you saw in most of our story, they cross multiple borders to come. So down here you see the border of Oklahoma, and this is about 1,000-mile journey, and this is a map of the railways. So we're just going to talk about La Bestia, the beast. Many migrants ride these freight trains, and the risks of it are obvious. And not all the children travel by train, and some come in cars or buses. But it's a very long journey. It can take anywhere from a few weeks to a few months. Sometimes they'll get stopped by the border and get sent back and start again. And of course, as they travel, they're vulnerable to corrupt officials or police who might bribe them or try to take advantage of them. They don't really know if they're smugglers, a person they can trust or not. They might get kidnapped along the way. I mean, if they're staying in certain safe houses, and they're also traveling through areas that are controlled by different gangs. So I looked at the kids who had to stay in a safe house or a hotel for a week because two gangs were fighting it out for church. So once they make the journey from their home country across, in most cases, multiple borders, they cross the border into the U.S. So this is an image of a border crossing in the western part of the country. This is south of Tucson, Arizona. Bless you. And I was there a few years ago, and I mean, the image says it all. Has anyone ever been to the Sonora Desert, or that part of the country in the southwest? Hot, arid, mountainous, very rugged terrain, not a lot of water, and not a lot of shade. So the risks of crossing there speak for themselves. Many of the kids, and one other note about the desert border crossing. So there was this movement in the 1990s, several projects to kind of secure the border and stop the flow of migrants across the southern border to the U.S. And so the idea was, let's make it harder to cross in urban areas, so places like Juarez and El Paso in Texas, so places like San Diego in California. More walls were built, water crossing, became more difficult. And the idea, the mindset behind that was, well, if we just make it harder to cross in urban areas, then the desert and the rough terrain is going to serve as a natural border, or a natural deterrent for people to migrate. Well, that in fact was not the case, and it just essentially funneled people into more dangerous terrain. And here you can see an image of it. Many of the kids I talked with crossed in the northeastern part, so across the Rio Grande, or what's known as the Rio Bravo in Texas. Coming across on inner tubes, or the kind of thing that you do. Take if you were going to go sit in a swimming pool, sort of a thing, or come across this way. So once they enter the United States, generally the children are apprehended by the CBP, Customs and Border Protection. And most children that I talk to plan to give themselves up. They're not trying to sneak into the country. They're coming into the U.S., planning to give themselves up, to enter into this process of, trying to see if they can stay and be connected with them. And the children's reports of how they were treated by the CBP really varied. Some kids said that they were calm and respectful. Others said that they were yelled at. One girl I met with actually told her that she was rounded up by police dogs. Sometimes the patrol people speak Spanish.
Spanish, sometimes they don't. The experience is very. So after they cross the border, and of course by this point, they've been on the road for weeks. They're probably hungry, possibly dehydrated. They may have been assaulted along the way. They may have been robbed along the way. They get taken into custody and taken to what's known as a hilera. And hilera is Spanish slang for ice box or refrigerator. And the reason that these detention facilities on the border are known as hileras is they're kept very, very cold. They're like air conditioned for like 50 degrees or something like that. So here's an image of the hilera. So it's pretty, the children have pretty tough stories to share about being in the LS. They're obviously overcrowded, as you can see. And I think some of it is just no one was expecting this surge of children to start coming across the border over the summer. So some of it was just no one was prepared to deal with the numbers. But some of the stories I heard were obvious overload. There's just a lack of oversight and lack of accountability to people who are running these places. I heard stories of kids who weren't given adequate food, not enough food, or people were spoiled, not enough water. Maybe one toilet for 30 or 40 people. I had a girl who was in the light up for 13 days. She wasn't allowed to shower until she was 12 days. People coming with babies who weren't given diapers or adequate sanitary supplies. So the situation with the light up was really bad. It's something that I'm proud to say that American Children of Justice has taken the testimonies of several immigrants who face pretty serious abuse in the U.S. and have filed an FTCA, which is the Federal Tort Claims Act, on their behalf. And so there is a movement in the U.S. and in family detention centers like Artesia, Artesia's Urban Mobilities, where there's abuse and mistreatment going on. So there is a movement to reform the way that we do detention. It's just abuse that needs to stop. So after the children are in a hilera, they might be in one or two hileras for anywhere between a day or two, which can up to like 2 weeks. Then they're transferred into the custody of ORR, which is the Office of Refugee Resettlements. And ORR contracts out with organizations that run shelters. So places that maybe by Catholic Charities or by other faith-based organizations. And generally, the kids that I work with have very positive things to say about the way they were treated in the shelters. In the shelters, they have a social work who tries to connect them with family in the United States. Children, go to school while they're in the shelters, and then also try to connect them with legal services. So this is when many of the kids that Americans for Justice works with them when they're in the shelters. So when they're processed, when they come into the country, they're given a court date. They go into a shelter, and then the race is on. The clock is ticking to try to get legal representation for as many children as possible before they go to court. So when they come into the AI Justice Office, they're given familiar rights help, and we need them to get their story and figure out how to and again, if you can just imagine, if you've ever dealt with legal proceedings of any kind in your life, it's complicated, it's legalese, it's a very confusing process. So if you add that you're a child, you add that you're in a foreign country, if you add that you don't speak English as your first language, so we always, my colleague and I, if we're trying to explain to these kids the difference between being deported and voluntary departure, and what asylum status is, what human trafficking is. And these are really kids. They would come in, and I just remember this one girl, I was sitting and giving this presentation with her, kind of staying with her legs on the shelf, and she's just sitting there, like her little legs are swinging on the chair, and we were giving them candy to eat, and we were playing Jenga, and it's like, they're kids. They're kids. So to give you an image of what the courts are like, I have a brief video that was put out that Voice of America made in September while I was there of what court is like. And so I show this to you just to give you an image of what the rocket docket means. I'm in this video and several of my colleagues are in this video as well, some of the HM volunteers.
Attorney Elizabeth Sanchez Kennedy rises with the sun to face a day of uncertainties. I don't know if today's going to be crazy or if I'm sitting around in the train. I don't know. She represents children in Miami's immigration court, where the numbers are only going up. More than 4,000 undocumented children were sent to Florida in the first 8 months of this year. There is barely enough time to grab the files and access legal services before racing to court. In July, the Obama administration ordered fast-tracking the court cases for children who crossed the border illegally. Today's subject, the court cases. Now, when undocumented children are crossing the border, they are detained here in shelters. Like this one in Texas. Then they are sent to live with relatives in the U.S. until their court cases are heard. Florida received the largest number this year, behind only Texas, New York, and California. It's a typical day here at the U.S. Immigration Court in Miami. 36 children on the dock in the morning, 30 in the afternoon, with just 4 judges. The children are scared as they walk into court, but a 15-year-old Roxanne who did not want to appear with people. I'm sorry, I didn't know what they were. The children sit on one side with a lawyer if they have one. The government attorney sits on the other side, and the judge here. The first hearing lasts only a couple of minutes. Advocates such as Americans for Immigrant Justice train lawyers on how to defend their legal claims. Our concern is for children who don't have, a reputable home to help them with their cases. If they don't fall through the courts, in many instances they feel largely returned to terrible abuse of them. Like Newman Fernando Lorenzo, who escaped the Honduran gangs with his 3 younger brothers. He now feels misled. Some say the Obama administration is misinterpreting the law that children from Central America cannot be deported without a hearing. David Puckett of Floridians for Immigration Enforcement. But no changes are expected soon, since the U.S. government has delayed action on immigration reform until after November's midterm elections. So for now, the rocket docket propels the cases, pushing kids through first and fast. Carolyn Pursuit, VOA News, Miami.
So that video was filmed in September, and that continues to be the case. That judges are seeing between 50 and 60 kids a day. And the U.S. Lawyers, an organization of U.S. judges, has written a letter complaining about the rocket docket, and they do not like this. They know that this is not how justice is supposed to work. And I think the judges are in a tough spot. The judge that the courtroom where I work, I could tell the judge, he really works not to report anybody. If there was someone, a kid at a court date who wasn't there, the judge would hear all the other cases first and then say, Jose Antonio Ortiz, is he here? Okay, go out into the hallway. Maybe he hasn't found the right room. Wait, look, the letter that we sent, the notice to appear was sent to this address, but this other address is listed. Maybe he can get his letter, so we better give him a continuance. You can see, the judges are aware that, sending these kids back, sending them back really isn't the way. So I have to just, it's a system that, many of the people who are working within it, like judges, really don't like the system, and they know that this is not the way that justice is supposed to work.
Would you? Sure. Can you explain the intent was the intent to help facilitate the children's deportation, or was it to facilitate their being in? What was the intent?
the rocket bucket.
Yeah.
I mean, the intent of that, I think it's just, the system was overwhelmed, so they're just trying to move them through.
So the intention was good, but they didn't have
I mean,
logistics.
right. I mean, I guess, they're fulfilling
not
the
enough
law.
judges.
They're fulfilling TVPRA in that they're giving the kids a hearing. But if the kids, I mean, that's where things get tricky. Being in the U.S. without legal authorization is a civil offense, not a criminal offense. So these kids aren't automatically lawyers. I mean, if any of us in this room, if anybody, commits a criminal offense, and we say we can't afford a lawyer, we're given a public, there's a public defender. But these kids don't have access to lawyers, so that's the challenge. Like, okay, you have a right to a hearing before a judge, but if you don't understand what the heck that means, how is that justice? And then the kids are even vulnerable to some, like in the patio there's like these notaries who come along and claim to be lawyers, or claim to be legit, and say, oh, just give me X number of dollars and I'll get you a permiso, I'll get you a permit to stay here. And so a lot of our work was trying to represent as many kids as we could, to refer cases out, or at least to make sure that the kids, weren't taken advantage of, to be, by people, claiming to be lawyers, or, taking advantage of the fact that they don't understand the system.
So this was talking about Florida. Did all of those kids enter into Florida, or they moved from other places?
The kids generally, cross along the southern border, most commonly in Texas, somewhere along the Mexican border between Texas and Mexico. And then they're sent to shelters different places, often where they have family. So maybe a child crosses and they have, a parent and siblings in, Miami. So that's why they were sent there. And it's also, there's only so many places that have, federal immigration courts. So they're sent to places where they can, where their cases can be heard. And just a brief overview of some of the, the forms of relief, how can the children stay here? And these are the forms of relief that Americans for Justice and other organizations screen for. Family petitions, so the child is a U.S. citizen parent, they can apply that way. Of course, this is a system that's very backlogged and has a lot of issues that we need to apply for relief. A T visa is for survivors of trafficking. I believe you put some up in the trafficking here. A U visa is people who've been victims or witnesses of crimes or assisted with investigation. SIDGE, or Special Immigrant Juvenile Status, is for children who've been abused, abandoned, or neglected in their home country, and it's determined that it's not in their best interest to be returned. For asylum, and as you saw in Oscar's video, Oscar was eligible for asylum. And asylum is, there's these very specific criteria if you're, facing persecution based on your race or your ethnicity or your religious affiliation. Eligible for asylum. This is a quote by one of my colleagues, Julie. I just encourage you to read it. So, I was down there in the legal system. It's very true that this idea that what someone said at the beginning about solidarity is that it's not just us in there, it's not those people over there. But I always, whenever I had a child in my office, I was aware, like, maybe this is the only time this child is going to have a compassionate adult who's going to listen to their story. So I always try to give them as much time as possible to speak and to be hearing and empathetic ear, as well as providing, some legal advice and orientation of, the court process and all of that. And they have amazing stories to tell, and as I said, many places have amazing resilience, and and it was really beautiful. In many cases, the children have been reunited with families. So maybe a child's parent left when they were 3 or 4 years old, and now the child, has come into the U.S. and they get reunited with their parents in 10 years. So I have kids who have been reunited with their families. Then you can also imagine the struggles of that. Maybe you only ever talk on the phone, with your parents for almost your whole life. tremendous transition that the children are experiencing. And I'm really glad at AI Justice it's part of a larger network of organizations. So we actually have on the same site, in the same building, an organization that provides sonic healing and therapy to kids. So when I would hear the story of a child who also experienced physical or sexual abuse, or had a really horrific story of crossing, I think that there's a good kind of it as well. So, our office just provides legal representation, but we partner with other service providers who really try to address all of the needs of the children. So, what can you do? You've heard all this information tonight, and we're going to have some conversation now, but what can you do to take action? And I say advocate, educate, pray, give, encourage. Break those down a little bit. The most important thing I think is to stay informed and encourage others to do the same. I don't feel like our media really does justice to any issues. I mean, everything is soundbited. The most right extreme voices on both sides are the ones that get heard. And we have this rich tradition as Catholics of Catholic social teaching, which is not soundbiteable, and really encourages study and reflection and being informed. So I encourage you to learn more. American Center for Justice is a great website that will keep updated. You can also find them on Facebook, and they post things there. They have a YouTube channel, so the video that I showed at the beginning of our postcard, that's on their YouTube channel. I also brought here on the table brochures. These reports are great, and I only have a couple of them, so I'm actually just going to leave one here with Mary Lynn for you all to keep at the Newman Center. But this was a report that was created. It's called Children Fleeing Central America Stories from the Front Lines in Florida. It has a lot of stories about the awareness and some really good recommendations at the end on legislative actions we want to see taken in order to protect the children. So I encourage you, whether it's through paper or online, to stay informed about this issue. And I'm also giving you my information here. This is my email, my phone in the office. And if you wake up tomorrow and you want to think, gosh, I don't understand something you said, or I want to know more, really don't hesitate to contact me. I don't claim to be an expert about everything, but I'll answer the question to the best of my ability, or get in touch with my colleagues who can answer it. So this is just a whole list of organizations. If you are into social media, you can like and follow. The Humility of Mary Volunteer Service, and I have flyers in here as well. And so there's kind of through the auspices of their office that I am intended to serve. And it's the Sisters of Humility of Mary, is a community that I'm living with and serving with now. And one of the sisters is the founder of American Center for Justice. The Ignatian Solidarity Network is a great organization that has a lot of Ignatian spirituality. They also do a lot of advocacy as well. Justice, the Gender Refugee Service deals with refugee issues worldwide. The Catholic Migrant Farm Worker Network, which is based on Barbara Fair in Trenton. The Marian Office for Global Concerns. Amnesty International, which is sort of like a big role around a long time human rights organization. The U.S. Committee on Refugees and Immigrants. The UN High Commissioner on Refugees. And No More Deaths from Homeless Militants, which is an organization providing humanitarian relief on the desert parts of the border. So, these are all organizations that provide information, and they also, most of them, either follow them on Facebook or sign up on that email list and get action alerts. So, piece of legislation comes up, and they inform yourself about the issue and contact your legislator. Those are some good ways to take action. I also encourage you, especially the students, if you're thinking about a year of service or an experience of service after you graduate, there's lots of organizations out there. I was a Jesuit volunteer for 2 years in Nicaragua. Mary Volunteer Service sends folks to volunteer in Cleveland, in Muffins, Florida, and Miami, Florida. But there's lots and lots of organizations out there, and I imagine Mary Lynn can put you in touch with the Catholic Volunteer Service.
Yeah, we have their book here somewhere. It'll be there, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, and we've had reps from CBN come and talk to our students before.
Great. I mean, I can say that. I think my experience in service this college was probably the most formative and meaningful thing that I've done in my life. So if you have the ability to do that, I can't recommend it highly enough, whether it's in the U.S. or overseas. taking legislative action. If you look in the report, there's more specifics there. And obviously, this is all constantly changing. The big picture is we want comprehensive immigration reform. The whole system needs to be really reworked. Looking specifically at the issue of the children, I mentioned CBPRA, the Protection Reauthorization Act. So that is certainly something that we want to stay in place so that the children continue to have the right to go before the judge. As I mentioned, the situation with the NEDA, where there really needs to be more oversight for the folks that are working there. So that's a place that really could use some attention and pride. And another possibility is the report that goes into it is providing what's known as TPS, or temporary protected status to the children. And TPS is not permanent legal status, but it allows someone to remain in the U.S. And get a work permit and leave and have get a driver's license, that kind of thing, for I think a period of 2 years at this point, which then at least gives them a chance to work through the process, find a reputable lawyer, figure out if they want to serve. And it would also help those of us on the legal services side not being able to scramble to try to take on as many cases as we can. So we're going to move into a time of conversation and questions, but a few things. I want to close with a few stories and an image. And another action step, I mentioned encourage, and one of the ways to take action. And right now, there are 3 young women serving with military volunteer service in Miami. They are back at the villa for their mid-year retreat. And we got this card for them, and I just encourage you, if you want to sign it, send a note of encouragement to the lawyers who are looking for American children of justice, representing the children, just to say, thank you for your service, we're praying for you, thank you for standing with the children, that kind of thing, and we really appreciate it. And, I always think of, when you go to church, when you go to readings, so many of our scriptures are really letters, and they're letters of support, written between these little churches, these little communities that will be informed, that will try to share the gospel and respond to the needs, and encourage each other and build each other up. So, in that spirit, I think this morning I think we'll do it. Great. I encourage you to do something there. And finally, coming back to this idea of solidarity, I leave you with this image of the world from space. I think so often borders and boundaries can seem so fixed. One from here and one from there. And it's such a powerful thing in the last 40 or so years that we've had this image of the world from space, and all of a sudden, I think it shows us how impermanent or not fixed these boundaries that we are. And so it's just such a powerful image of the way that we really are one human family. Look at us from space. And I want to leave another story as well. I'm also a freelance writer and a blogger, and this is a story that something that I wrote about while I was down in Miami. A few years ago, I was in D.C. at the Holocaust Museum. And there's, really well done museum. I recommend going if you're ever in this area. But I learned the story of 2 ships, the Flanders and the St. Louis. And so in the late 1930s, when National Socialism was on the rise in Germany, and Europe was becoming less and less of a welcoming place for people who were Jewish, there was a group of Jewish refugees that boarded these 2 vessels. And they left Europe, and these are Jews from various countries, came to Cuba, docked in Montana, and they got so close that they were in the harbor there, that their family members who lived in Cuba could go out on little small boats, and they could wave to them. They could be on the deck and they could look out and wave to their families. But the Jewish refugees were not given a chance to disembark and reunite with their families, and so they went to Miami. And again, docked in Miami, got close enough to see the city lights of Miami, but they were not given harbor. And so after several weeks, they gave up, and in both cases, these ships returned. And tragically, people will return to their home countries and in some cases face severe persecution and death under their right under Hitler. And so I just remembered that story often as I was working with the children. In so many cases, these children they've left horrific violence, they've made this long journey, they've gotten here to the U.S. In many cases, they've been reunited with family that they've been separated from for so long. And now the question remains, will they be able to stay? Or will they be sent back into harm's way, into these violent situations? So the question then for us becomes, where do we offer harbor? And I think it's a practical, political question, but on a deeper level, as people of faith, it's a spiritual question. And that's the question of how big is our us? How big is our we? How big are these circles of belonging? And who is included and who is excluded? So before we go into conversation, kind of by way of closing prayer, I want to play a song by Sweet Honey in the Rock, and it's called Harbor. And so as you listen to the words, which are just a series of questions, I just invite you to reflect on this question of how big is my circle and to whom do I offer harbor? Your attention tonight. Bless you all and bless us all as we continue on our mountain journey and continue to seek to be that harbor in the world. pull up a chair and we can invite your responses.
You can have this chair if you want. Excellent question. Well, some of that remains to be seen because generally, because the process is backlogged, they're still in process. So what most often happens is they're given a first hearing, and then if they don't have legal representation, the judge gives them a continuance to see, to give them more time to try to find a lawyer. And about the UN High Commissioner on Refugees estimates that 65% of the children have legitimate claims for relief. So I can't give you a percentage of, how many, have gotten status, how many, certainly some have gotten status, certainly some have been sent back, and others are, remain in legal proceedings. So it still very much is unfolding. Yes, almost all the kids have some family member here in the States. Most often a parent, sometimes it's an older sibling. But yeah, generally they're coming with the intention of reuniting with family here, as well as, fleeing the violence in their home country. It varies. So one thing, and I'll go back to, I mentioned this, that the youngest child I had in my office was 6 weeks old, and then she had a 6-year-old brother. But the case in this family, so the unaccompanied alien child that in my office that came at the age of 6, he had the designation of UAC. He came to reunite with his mother. His mother is undocumented, has no legal status, but is married, and her husband has TPS, or temporary protected status. And they have 2 children, a 3-year-old and then the newborn, the real little baby, who were both born here in the U.S., so they're U.S. citizens. And so this is the case, this is part of the reason that immigration reform gets so complicated is, if you want to take the hard line of like, well, let's just ship them all back, there's so many families like this family who are mixed status families, where you have, someone who's a citizen, you have someone who's undocumented, you have someone with this kind of visa. And so you either have to choose between separating family or, looking at deporting U.S. citizens. And so that's where value for family unification and family unity being a big value is one of the, driving forces in the U.S. bishops and really all Catholic organizations framing of the immigration issue and call for comprehensive immigration reform.
Represent a child. Do you deal with that, or in one case maybe an immigrant, in one case a refugee? If it's a refugee, you think they have better chances in
Right. Right, and technically, the refugee status is a different status, and in order to have refugee status, you have to apply for that in your home country. So someone who's a refugee has, gotten that designation before they entered the U.S., so they have, status when they enter. Whereas these children they don't have refugee.
Is that at the U.S. consulate? They have the consulate?
Yes.
It's not their government that's going to give it.
No, it's the U.S. government.
Right.
Yes.
So it's U.S. consulate. So how many children go to the U.S. consulate for refugee status?
If
they do get that status, are they then sent to the U.S. via
Right, and in fact, that's one of the. I'm going to pull this out so I can read the right language. That's one of the recommendations that I believe they're looking at moving forward with is trying to get get a way for children to do in-country processing, so that they don't have to go through the whole journey. Yeah, this is so if you're interested, this is on page 37 of the AI Justice Report. Ensure that any in-country refugee processing is fair, safe, and available to all children who seek it. And then it goes on to look at concerns for that. But yeah, I mean, refugee status. I mean, sometimes these children are referred to as refugees, but in terms of like the actual procedural legal definition of refugees, they're not. I mean, they're UACs under the law, even though their stories, from their experiences, are very similar to refugees from other countries and other contexts. Other questions or comments? I don't specifically know an Oscar's case because he was a client several years ago. So I didn't work directly on his case, and Ideal, the lawyer, I never talked with his lawyers about the specifics of his case. So I'm not sure. I mean, certainly in many cases, girls and women are threatened as well. So I can't say to the specifics of his case. Well, I have a question for you all, and this is an exercise I like to do when I go out and speak with groups. So raise your hand if at least one of your grandparents was born in a country besides the United States or spoke a language besides English as their first language. Now keep your hands up. And now what if at least one great-grandparent? Have to think about it maybe? Yeah. All right, you can put your hands down. And do you know anything about your family's story of, which countries they came from, what led them to leave their home country, what their experience was like when they came? Mm-hmm. And do you know what their experience was when they came? The Italian side?
Not exactly. I never mentioned some of my great grandparents on that side. But an example would be my great grandfather in Italy was research, which is a very dignified position. When he came here, he, a stonemason, so quite a drop in his status, and helped to build a really beautiful church in our town. And to a bit of rough growth, but he could never be a police officer here in the United States. Certainly faced a lot of discrimination. And not really speak the language. Honestly, some of the are darker, so faced a lot of racial discrimination as well. Others would be worse.
Communities up there saying ethnicity. And that's how they got married. They found out what actors that they got married to each other. And so that grandparents say that this romance it was. This is what you do to move forward. Sounds like that.
I think it's really valuable to know those stories, particularly, so many different there was waves of European immigrants from other countries faced discrimination. Irish need not apply, signs. Or actually, I was presenting in Buffalo and met with a woman who was Sicilian American, and she told the story of how her grandfather worked. I think it was like in a shipyard or something like that up on Lake Erie, and how he was basically considered the same as the African American workers. I mean, there was what?
You know the term.
I mean,
Yeah, and I'm not going to say it.
I know.
But so she talks about how her family became white, that her Sicilian American immigrant family, was not really considered white, and then as cultural attitudes changed and as the family, and her community, her whole Sicilian community in Buffalo assimilated, they became white. So I mean, I think it's really interesting in light of immigration, and then also in light of the larger conversations about race that are happening in our country, for us to know our own stories, and to understand our families' experiences, and the similarities that they may share with some of the immigrants who are coming from different countries today. Mm-hmm.
I've been looking into my ancestors, doing ancestry.com.
Mm-hmm.
But the commonalities, I mean, the Swedes came over and doing the census, they were poor. The next generation didn't get any more wealth. The Swedes, the Germans, they avoided the draft. They were poor. The English, they were poor. They're all poor.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a long time for them and they went to different states, moved around, tried different things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My father would tell stories that he was very difficult. I mean, big family and hardships. And the siblings laughed about him, but he didn't. So, anyway, that was the commonality. We were trying to get a better life, but it's hard.
Now, is there anyone here that has traveled to the community that you work with in El Salvador? Mm-hmm. So anything that I share tonight that resonates with your experience there?
We never see we didn't have to be killed by the police, but we got into the game. Mm-hmm. But no, we haven't.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
He was a lawyer.
Living with his grandparents.
It wasn't clear what happened to his parents. He was raised on his grandparents and listening to them they were doing his grandparents. There was a generation between they were younger. Kind of natural that he was a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And then he became a minister. I was happy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
He just wasn't. He was probably 7, 8 years old. But he was not able to respond in the same way as other people. Oh, yeah. His grandparents were very nice when we visited. He was given an opportunity to go to school, the school we support in the times and so on. And then I think because of his inabilities, he went in the first grade, but he was already 25 years old. He was in first grade, so the mandatory. And so he was only in school.
I mean, it's just, I can't imagine. I mean, I think we all know that bullying goes on in school, and like we all had experiences of being teased in school, but to go to school and be told, you have to join my gang or I'm going to, kill your family, and, you know, what it would mean to have to drop out of, like, have to drop out of school, like knowing that school is like your only opportunity to learn something and, maybe get a decent job and help your family, but for it not to be a safe place to go, it's just, I mean, I can't imagine, what that would mean, because I don't know, when I was their age, I was worrying about who I was going to go to junior prom with, and like, was I going to get the lead in the school musical? So, I mean, it's just really tremendous what the children have experienced, and also, like I said, this their depth of faith in many, many cases have a very strong faith that, even though they've grown up surrounded by violence, which, family violence, gang violence, police violence, this desire that, like, I don't want to be involved with that. Like, I don't want to be involved with drugs. I don't want to be with the maras, be with the gangs. So it just, for me, it's hopeful that I think there's something within us. It's this, I don't know, this, when Jesus talks about desiring abundant life, I mean, I think there's something within us that desires that abundant life that I saw in so many of these children in their desire to, remove themselves from that context and just be in a place where they could live in peace and be with their family and go to school. Mm-hmm.
Students have opportunities or a perceived opportunity, and maybe less likely to get involved or maybe able to create opportunity on their journey to really, as difficult as that may be.
Yeah.
The train photos we can we've heard stories about people coming to this country in that train. And actually see it as a whole different
couple observations from it seems many of the people in this situation evaluation as Christians, it just doesn't make sense to me. Many of these people really don't have any values that really
I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah, and it's to speak to both of your points. I mean, I think, yes, we talk about the right that people have to migrate and to live without violence and without not in abject poverty, but people first and foremost have a right not to migrate and to have a dignified life in their home country. So that's the harder question: is how do you build peace and security in these home countries? And Catholic Relief Services has worked with microcredit loans And there are different, initiatives to try to reduce violence. I know the auxiliary bishop, I'm blanking on his name, of San Pedro Sula in Honduras has been really, really prophetic about trying to create, truces and dialogue between the gangs. So that's, there's the responsibility on one hand to try to, provide legal representation for the children that are here, but then ultimately, the goal is that people can live in peace in their home country, because no one wants to leave home. No one wants to leave behind their family and their food and their traditions and everything they've ever known. I mean, you only do that when life becomes completely, unlivable. So, that's where, justice and peace building and development efforts, are really key. And Catholic Relief Services does a lot of great work, and I imagine you've probably heard about their work. And I see you got a rice bowl down here.
Yeah.
All right, it's almost.
Oh, it's my swear jar.
Oh, it's your swear jar? Your Lenten swear jar?
Yeah, it's
That's awesome.
for God's glory. That's all I'm gonna say.
Bad day for you, though.
Day for God's glory. I didn't say that I, was being an offense. I just said
There we go. That's a nice frame.
Yeah, that's right.
It's all
That's right. Yeah, let's just not go there. But I think we would like to take a picture together as a group, so that it could accompany our witness and down to Florida and for other purposes. So we could use witness protection. But, so maybe if we all